Hello, I'm Pete Starkey at Real Time with IPC here on the first day of IPC Expo in San Diego. Delighted to meet again Rich Heimsch from Superdry. Rich, nice to see you on your home ground.
Nice, good to see you.
Thank you for joining us, Rich. Rich, the last time we spoke was in Germany back in November.
Yeah.
I think we had a very interesting conversation. But one point that you mentioned was the difference in attitude to moisture control on moisture-sensitive components between Europe and the USA. Now we're this side of the Atlantic. Could you pick up on that topic?
Now, what I was saying at the time was that we're talking about our products, and what really drove our products so far ahead and at the pace that it was the demand in Europe came a lot sooner, and much of that was fueled by RoHS legislation. Yep. Because virtually overnight, every component in a manufacturing shop needed to be tracked. Now, obviously, they knew it was coming, but there were many more important things to get in place, like what kind of paste and what kind of reflow we're going to use. So there was a shock when everything had to be managed, and so baking everything and then logistically dealing with it after it came out of the oven led to the development of combination storage and floor life reset cabinets, as well as the understanding that rapid recovery time is needed if you're going to access a cabinet frequently. Also, the advances in long-term storage were another dimension of this that were spearheaded in Europe, and that generally speaking, there's still about a 5-year difference, if you will, in the state of the two markets. It's noticeably changing. It's very measurable anecdotally at trade shows. Some of our products that I brought to this Apex show 8 or 10 years ago, the typical question, if there even was a question, is, well, what does that do and what would I need it for? Whereas today, we commented this morning, most of the people who walked up to us had a good idea of what they were looking for. Mm-hmm. So the progression has continued. Still, end-of-line yield is very rarely impacted by a very solid moisture management process, and there are still many occasions where the budgeting for capital equipment of this kind is passed over.
Yeah.
Which I can understand. Interestingly enough, as people are getting more familiar, people are understanding it better and better, and are putting processes in place where they didn't exist before. And that's not across every industry, because military people and medical electronics people, automotive, have known forever that there are real issues that have to be addressed. And so they certainly led the traceability quest, which has now all been rolled up in a big industry 4.0, under a big industry 4.0 umbrella. One of the places that the two markets, though, didn't have a gap in timing, or as much of a gap in timing, is in the reset of floor life of expired components.
Yeah.
And I found over the last couple of years, a lot of customers buying their very first cabinet were buying them with heat. And understanding the need for floor life reset was already in place to a degree, because people were familiar with the fact that we bake, would be a typical comment.
Could you expand a little on the meaning of floor life reset?
Once a component has past its safe floor lifetime and its MSL has been expired, the need to remove the moisture that it's absorbed to make it safe again was traditionally done with a high temperature bake, 125.
But that has other consequences. It removes the moisture, but it also starts metallurgy happening and oxidation happening.
And it creates intermetallic growth. So the solderability is impacted, and you can only do it once. Exposing it to lower temperatures at very low humidities, the humidities that didn't exist, well, the humidity did, but the equipment didn't exist 20 odd years ago when the original standard was written, changed that dynamic. And so at 0.5% relative humidity, you can dry pretty effectively even at ambient temperature. And at 40 or 60 C, it dries basically as quickly as a 90 C or faster than a 90 C at atmosphere. And so the idea of having a more rapid and a safer baking process was picked up on much more quickly than the safe storage dimension of this moisture management.
Is this something that you expected or something that you were interested to observe?
No, I was interested to observe it because that the pattern was different. It was, in Europe, it was, I have to store. I know I have to bake everything, so now I need more and more storage, and I have to keep track of floor life exposure, and that was being done. But then, with so many components, it became such a logistical issue that what if I had some place that I could bake them and store them, so I could leave them there. I don't have to, there's a whole movement that didn't have to take place. And that was the genesis of those original drying cabinets, was something that could do both. And that's now, really one of our most popular products in a large. Now, people have a need for both, and that's one of the reasons that the very large, diverse product line is of significance, because you don't need the top of the line capability to do every single job in a moisture management process to do it effectively.
In terms of floor life reset, once you return the components to the controlled humidity area, what is the sort of recovery time typically?
Well, you can, if you've had close track over how much expiration, you can restore that 6, 8, 10 hours. If you have lost track, which is more normally the case, then you've got to go with the maximum capabilities. And so you're talking typically it's 1 to 3 days that are needed to completely restore. Basically, you've got to reduce the percentage of water weight back below 0.1%.
No, it's just interesting to follow up our discussion. In Germany with a sort of the different scenario that we see in the US market.
Yeah, and it's early. It's still early in this exhibition, but it has one of the comments we made to one another in the first couple hours was that everyone who walked up and knew what they were looking for, as opposed to, I've heard about these sorts of things. What is it? What exactly does it do? And that's
Yeah.
You know, it's a continuing trend. And it's
So this difference in awareness is now not so much a difference. The awareness
yes.
is growing here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the familiarity with the terminology, the familiarity
Yeah.
with the risks,
Yeah.
and the familiarity with what needs to be done is much greater
Yeah.
than just a few years ago.
That's
for
fine.
sure. Yeah.
Well, Rich, it's
Hey,
been
always
great to
always-
see you again.
Always good to see you.
And I say thanks very much for your
Pleasure.
time. Thanks for the update, and
Yes.
thanks for balancing now
Sure.
the comparison.
Great.
It's been a great pleasure. Thanks
See you
very
again.
much indeed.
Okay.
Pete Starkey, Real Time with IPC. Thank you.